We'll be watching. All right, News Nation's Louis Dean, thank you as always for joining us. Plus, former President Biden making his first public appearance since announcing his battle against an aggressive form of prostate cancer. The president and former First Lady attending their grandson's graduation this week, and it comes as Republican lawmakers double down on their probe of the former president's health decline. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer demanding testimony from Biden's doctor about what he calls a cover-up of his health and age-related decline while in office. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin also reportedly writing letters to 24 former Biden aides to answer questions from his committee. We turn now to our political panel. Mally Smith, Democratic strategist and former political director for the Harris campaign in North Carolina, and John Thomas, Republican political strategist and managing director at Nestpoint. Gentlemen, great to have you both. Mally, I'd like to start with you. Some on the left arguing this probe is a colossal waste of time, energy, resources, attention, you name it, that the party needs to be looking forward. What do you make of some of those assertions?
Look, I worked for President Biden's campaign. I worked in his administration. I think he was a great president and he's a good man, but I don't think he should have run for re-election. If he didn't run for re-election, I think we would have had a stronger chance of keeping the House. But with that being said, I think Representative Comer should focus his attention and his investigative powers on the obvious fraud and corruption that is happening right in front of us. President Trump is currently profiting off the presidency. He's accepted a $400 million Qatari jet that won't even be given to the United States till the end of his term, and then it will be given to Trump personally. He is also having folks over and selling access as long as you buy his meme coin with his Bitcoin company. This is blatantly bad. It is blatantly corrupt, and I think Comer should look into that.
Well, and those are, some of the arguments being made on the left, John, that the attention should be focused elsewhere. Some of the questions, though, Republicans want to dive into is the former president's use of the Autopen, Biden's use of that. Was he responsible for all the executive orders issued under his name, or did White House personnel perhaps make some of those decisions? If it's found that in any of these scenarios that Joe Biden did not have the final say, or even potentially any say in some of these moves, what do you see the ramifications looking like?
Well, look, this isn't just looking in the rearview mirror to find out what happened here and what kind of scandal really of massive proportions this was. That's interesting. But actually, this has forward-looking implications. One, just like you said, Kelly, the Autopen, if it turns out that President Biden didn't authorize, wasn't aware of executive orders or legislation that he signed, could we potentially see that unraveled? That's significant. But I actually think there's something bigger at play here. And it's not about President Biden or his wrecked legacy in the last couple weeks. It's about the staff. It's about the cabinet members and the other political appointees who knew Biden wasn't fit for office and yet not only said nothing, they said the opposite, Kelly. They said he was fantastic. He was better than ever. They helped cover up along with the media. We need to know those staffers. We need to know their names. And one last thing, Kelly, look, we're looking at cabinet members like Pete Buttigieg, Vice President Harris. They're not done. Vice President Harris might be the next governor of California. Pete Buttigieg might be the next Democratic nominee for president. If they were willing to cover up or look the other way, or were too dumb to realize what was going on, the American people need to know that so they can make good decisions about elections in the future.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up right out of the gate. John, I'll follow up with turning to this big, beautiful bill. In recent days, we've heard Republican senators come out against this bill, several of them with cuts to Medicaid and spending being some key concerns. Quite a few political analysts looking at this say Republican senators, they'll likely come to some sort of agreement, get this passed. Do you agree? And if so, what do you think it'll take to get us there?
Yeah, I think it's going to get passed in part because, look, the president wants it passed, and he's still incredibly popular, particularly with these senators who are going to be the key votes that need to get across the line. So the president wants it done. These senators' primary bases that they have to worry about for their reelects are going to go along, if nothing, just because the president says so. But look, there seems to be the momentum. That's how I look at legislation, which is there momentum moving it forward, or are things stalled? Of course, there are going to be little tweaks in the Senate, but I would largely expect it to get passed roughly intact as it is.
So, Mally, many on the left have been focusing on what some are calling devastating impacts for the poor. We had a Republican strategist on yesterday who said, Republicans should be flipping that argument and asking Democrats where to cut spending, arguing that, taxing the wealthy is not going to provide the revenue to make significant inroads when we talk about tackling the deficit. So what do you make of that argument and your response as well?
Sure. I think Americans need to know two things about this bill. First, what this bill is designed to do. This bill is designed to give tax cuts to the very wealthy. It lowers taxes on millionaires and billionaires. It lowers the estate tax so billionaires can pass on more of their money tax-free to heirs. And it lowers taxes on big business. The second thing Americans need to know is, how do they pay for this? If that's the objective of the bill, what do they do to achieve this? Well, first off, they add $3.8 trillion to the deficit. So as you asked, you said, is there a concern about the deficit? This bill is going to make the deficit worse. Second, they can't even pay for the bill with the $3.8 trillion added to the deficit. They take health care away from folks on Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. They estimate that there will be about 13 million people who will lose their health care. And lastly, since that doesn't even pay for the giant tax giveaway to the wealthy, they take away food from those who need it in SNAP cuts. So that is the Trump Republican budget bill. It is a reverse Robin Hood to take away from the very poor to give to the very wealthy.
So, John, we've got about a minute left, but I do want to hit on this. Some of the criticisms Mally laid out. On Friday, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, he said, you really have to consider the economic growth the administration's projecting at the same time, adding that that's going to be a key piece of this economic puzzle, not just this bill on its own. What do you make of that response and also some of the criticisms Mally laid out?
Sure. Well, I find it pretty rich that Miley said this is just for the rich and billionaires. I don't know that billionaires work for tips. And President Trump, one of the most famous things in this bill is no tax on tips. That's significant relief for not just the middle class, but the lower class, number one. Number two, we don't have to really guess what's going to happen. We can look back to 2016 and see what Trump did when he initially pushed some of these tax cuts. The economy grew. The way the Republicans and President Trump are looking at this is a growth agenda, both growth and deregulation. It's a combination. If President Trump's plan here is grow the economy, lift everybody up, and that will bring in more tax revenue as a result. And you don't get more tax revenue by increasing taxes. You get it through growing the economy.
Let's talk about growth.
Thomas, I'm sorry. I'll give you 10 seconds, Mally. I apologize. They're yelling at me.
Well, I was going to say we should talk about growth, and I'll make it quick. Most folks who have estimated this, not the White House's own numbers, but nonpartisan folks who estimate that this will help grow the economy by 0.03%, and that's not even factoring in Trump's tariffs. So I don't think the growth argument is a strong one.
All right. There has been some back and forth about the numbers and the CBO, how they get some of those estimates. Mally Smith, John Thomas, appreciate thoughts on both sides. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kelly.
Well, today, family and friends gathering